What are some ridiculous history facts? When Alexander the Great was a child, he was reprimanded by a teacher for wastefully throwing 2 whole fistfuls of rare incense into a sacrificial fire. When he was an adult and captured Gaza, which happened to be the prime agricultural source of the incense he wasted, he sent home 18 tons of it home to the same teacher as a gift. Former U.S. President Andrew Jackson was approached by a man who pulled a gun on him. Smaller history fact: this was the first assassination attempt on a U.S. president. The man pulled the trigger and the cap went off, but the gunpowder failed to light. The man pulled a second gun and fired, but the gunpowder again failed to light. The assassin tried to get away, but not before Andrew Jackson got him and beat the S out of him with a cane. Potatoes were not very popular as a food in France. Like, they were seen as fit only for animals. Not only that, but they were considered generally not digestible by humans. So a pharmacist named Parmentier knew they were good food and wanted to popularize them among the working class. So he got a 2-acre farm to grow potatoes and placed armed guards around it at all times. People assumed armed guards meant something very valuable was growing there, so they began to steal the potatoes. That's how potatoes became popular in France's working class. Pepsi once had the 6th largest military in the world, after the price of Russian vodka couldn't cover their deal for Pepsi products. So they traded 17 submarines, a frigate, a cruiser, and a destroyer for a trade deal. Fun fact: the president of PepsiCo at the time told the National Security Advisor, "We are disarming the USSR faster than you are." General Omar Bradley was stopped by MP during the Battle of the Bulge in WW2 due to them thinking he was a Nazi infiltrator. The irony was that he was stopped because he correctly identified the capital of Illinois as Springfield when the officer thought it was Chicago. In 1967, Australian Prime Minister Holt disappeared while swimming in the ocean. He was presumed drowned, so naturally that year we named a swim center after him in memoriam. Added his name, which I meant to do when I wrote the post, but obviously my brain snapped midway through the sentence and I forgot it. 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis. The #1 finisher drove most of the race. He started the race, got tired and heat exhausted, and wanted to drop out. He got in a car to DQ himself and head back to the stadium, but along the way realized he was near the finish line and got out to claim the glory. The #2 finisher was carried across the finish line by his trainers. On a bogus pseudoscience theory, the trainers had been giving him a mixture of brandy, egg whites, and rat poison instead of water. When it came out that the #1 finisher had driven most of the course, this guy was given the gold despite the help from his trainers to finish. For some reason, the #3 finisher was just a regular guy who did nothing unusual. In this case, ordinary was extraordinary. The #4 finisher was a Cuban mailman who had raised the money to attend the Olympics by running around his entire country and asking for donations. When he landed in New Orleans, he lost all the money gambling. He managed to scrounge enough to get to St. Louis and attend the Olympics. However, he had no money for athletic gear, so he ran in dress shoes and pants hacked off at the knee by a fellow racer who happened to have a knife. He probably would have come in first had it not been for the hour-long nap he took on the side of the road after eating rotten apples he found at an orchard near the course. The #9 and #12 finishers were from South Africa and ran barefoot. South Africa didn't actually send a delegation. These were students who just happened to be in town and thought it sounded fun. #9 was chased a mile off course by angry dogs. Half the participants had never raced competitively before. Some died. St. Louis only had one water stop on the entire run. This, coupled with the dusty road, and exacerbated by the cars kicking up dust, lead to several fatalities. The Russian delegation arrived a week late because they were still using the Julian calendar until 1918, while effectively the rest of the world had switched to the Gregorian calendar. Credit to you /Draken Pyrothane for the synopsis, which I have shamelessly stolen and tweaked just a little for clarity and brevity. Third place was also unusual. Albert Cory was a Frenchman living in the United States and a member of the Chicago Athletics Association. There was confusion as to which country he was representing as the games were combined with the U.S. national championships for various sports, and the race officials were confused by his documents. In the marathon, he was counted as running for the U.S., but was counted as French in the 4-mile relay. Once FDR died, Truman didn't know about the Manhattan Project, but when he found out, he subtly tried to tell Stalin they were working on something big. Stalin was like, "Yeah, dude, I knew before you did." since he had so many spies in America. Henry Cavendish, the man who was vital in the discovery of gases and discovered hydrogen. He'd inherited a ton of money from his uncle and built a special castle, I think. He was incredibly introverted, so it was designed so that he never had to meet or see any of his servants. He communicated with them through notes only. He did, however, appreciate other scientists coming to visit and talk. His works mostly came after his death, of course, but I found this guy interesting. In 1908, there was a car race around the world that started in NYC. The route would start at NYC to San Francisco to Valdez, Alaska, across the Bering Strait through Russia and Europe, with the finish line in Paris. Cars were relatively new and road infrastructure was limited to only metropolitan areas, and even then, a lot of it was cobbled stone. But what you might have thought is, how in the world can a car get across the Pacific? Duh, they would drive across the Bering Strait during the winter when it froze into an ice bridge. Silly. The race began in Feb 1908 and immediately ran into challenges. To list a few: cars breaking down multiple times, lack of usable roads, car-hating people giving wrong directions, and, oh yeah, snow. The first team reached San Francisco in 41 days, but quickly realized that the proposed route from San Francisco to Alaska did not exist. So the organizers allowed teams to ship their cars to Valdez, Alaska, then continue on the ice bridge. Once in Valdez, the teams found out that there is, in fact, no ice bridge across the Bering Strait anymore because it melted till the 20,000 years ago. Small oversight. Organizers then allowed teams to ship their cars across the Pacific to Japan, then Russia to carry on. Despite all unpredictable and hilariously predictable odds, the winning team arrived in Paris 169 days later. Highly recommend to listen about it from the Dollop podcast. There's more nonsense that happens that I couldn't fit in / remember. Hannibal's defeat of the Romans at Lago Trosano. By leaving soldiers to light fires in the hills, he created the illusion that his army was 3 days' march away, when tens of thousands of men were actually concealed in the hills just above the lake. The Romans were surprised on the shore and trapped between the onslaught and the water. In their armor, half of the 30,000 Roman troops were either killed in battle or drowned in the lake. 5,000 were captured and the other 10,000 staggered back to Rome, creating panic that the greatest army in the world had just been handed their aid by a Carthaginian upstart. It was the greatest ambush in military history. During the Viking era, there was a leader named Sigurd. He allied with a Viking warlord named Thorstein. He wanted to conquer more land and expand his territory. He had already been very successful in doing so. This was until he feuded with another leader called Male Bucktooth or Male Tusk, as his front 2 teeth were abnormally large and bucktoothed. They decided to settle their matters on the battlefield, and both agreed on bringing 40 men each for the battle. However, Sigurd ignored the terms and brought 80 men. Bucktooth had realized he had been betrayed, but did not give up. They killed a number of Sigurd's men, but alas, they were overpowered and were all killed. Here's the catch. After the battle, Sigurd ordered his men to behead all the enemies and tie them to their saddles as trophies. However, as Sigurd rode home in victory, the severed head of Bucktooth pierced his leg, which led to an infection, killing him soon after. The Pastry War. A French pastry chef who lived in the outskirts of Mexico City wrote a letter of complaint to King Louis Philippe, claiming that in 1832 the Mexican army damaged his shop and stole several cakes, for which he was demanding 60,000 pesos from the Mexican government, who ignored the request. After this incident, King Louis Philippe decided to block all ports of entry in the Gulf of Mexico, which later on led to the French invasion of Veracruz. The Massachusetts colony banned celebrating Christmas. During that time period, many people used it as an excuse to get hammered and party. Another tradition was that the young adults would cross-dress, then go door to door singing songs and demanding food. This clearly doesn't fit with Puritan lifestyle, so the governor banned public celebrations. People could still celebrate it in their homes if they didn't get too rowdy. I think it was unbanned when Massachusetts became a state, but didn't become mainstream until Christmas became a national holiday. Nashville briefly legalized prostitution during the Civil War. Union soldiers stationed there kept getting syphilis, so that no prostitutes were put on a large barge in the river. I'm a little fuzzy on what happened after that, but no, it didn't work very well. So it was legalized and prostitutes had to be registered or get a license, I can't remember which, and were required to have STD checks. This lowered the amount of prostitutes with syphilis because it was getting caught and treated. That lowered the amount of soldiers getting syphilis and made the army happy. It was outlawed shortly after the war ended though. 1927 Liberian elections were referred to as the most rigged ever by Francis Johnson Morris, a modern head of the country's National Elections Commission, and also made it into the Guinness Book of Records as the most fraudulent election ever reported in history, as despite there being fewer than 15,000 registered voters, King received around 243,000 votes compared to 9,000 for Faulkner.